Procedemos entonces a la presentación de Amanda y de Cristina. Muy buenos días, muchas gracias por acompañarnos en este espacio. La verdad es que las 3 sesiones anteriores ha sido muy enriquecedor para abrirnos un horizonte de, de un contexto totalmente nuevo para nosotros y que representa un gran potencial. Quisiera presentar a Amanda Luna, es líder de energía limpia para Latinoamérica por parte de Carbon Trust. Ella cuenta con más de 13 años de experiencia internacional en políticas climáticas y ambientales, especializándose en financiamiento climático y energía limpia. Desde 2017 ha contribuido en el desarrollo de finanzas sostenibles en Latinoamérica, enfocándose en mejorar la transparencia y el reporte de impacto en los mercados de bonos temáticos. También para esta presentación en dupla, en equipo, nos acompaña Christina Starost. Ella es asociada en energía eólica marina. Ella trabaja en el desarrollo y gestión de proyectos de investigación y desarrollo a gran escala, en conjunto con la industria, en el marco del acelerador de energía eólica marina Offshore Wind Accelerator. También colabora en proyectos de asesoría técnica, brindando recomendaciones de política en materia de incentivos, marcos regulatorios, innovación, cadena de valor a clientes en los mercados emergentes de energía eólica marina. Todo ello de mucho interés para México y en particular para el sur-sureste de México. Muchas gracias. Bienvenidas. Ustedes pueden realizar su presentación.
Muchas gracias, Guillermo, y muchas gracias también al equipo de la Embajada Británica por invitarnos a participar en esta sesión. Voy a compartir mi pantalla y la primera parte de la presentación la voy a hacer yo en español y después le pasaré la palabra a mi colega Cristina para que las personas que quieran usar la función de traducción en Zoom la puedan activar. Bien, esta es un poco la agenda de la presentación. Comenzaremos por dar una introducción a quién es Carbon Trust y después mi compañera Cristina hablará de el rol o el papel de las cadenas de valor y las habilidades locales en el desarrollo de los proyectos de energía eólica marina. Y después pasaremos a hablar sobre las lecciones que podemos identificar de la experiencia del Reino Unido, cómo se ha logrado el despliegue de la energía eólica marina y un poco, más bien, qué es lo que se ha logrado y cómo se ha logrado esto. Y finalmente tocaremos un poco sobre cuál es el rol de los gobiernos a nivel local y nivel regional en el despliegue de la energía eólica marina o energía eólica costa afuera. Me voy a saltar un poco esta parte porque Guillermo ya nos presentó amablemente y pasaré a contarles quién es Carbon Trust. Nosotros somos una consultoría climática global con la misión de acelerar el paso hacia un futuro descarbonizado. Como pueden ver en la diapositiva, tenemos presencia a nivel global y apoyamos a clientes en los 5 continentes. Nuestro equipo está formado por más de 400 consultores y tenemos poco más de 24 años de experiencia. Yo estoy basada en la Ciudad de México y mi compañera Cristina en el Reino Unido. Y sí, tenemos oficinas también en Ámsterdam, en Berlín, en Sudáfrica y en Singapur. En Latinoamérica específicamente, nosotros empezamos a trabajar en la región desde 2011. La oficina de México es desde donde vemos todos los proyectos en la región. Y estamos estructurados o sí, formados en 5 temáticas principales. Una de ellas, energía limpia, que es el equipo que yo lidero, donde vemos el despliegue de la energía eólica costa afuera a lo largo de la región, pero también trabajamos en temas relacionados con política climática, finanzas sostenibles, agricultura sostenible y sostenibilidad corporativa. Como pueden ver, trabajamos con clientes tanto del sector público a nivel nacional, subnacional y local, con clientes del sector privado y con clientes del sector financiero. Específicamente en el desarrollo del mercado de la energía eólica marina o costa afuera, Trabajamos en 4 ejes. El primero tiene que ver con toda la parte de política y ayudamos a los tomadores de decisión para que puedan identificar cuáles son las necesidades que van a permitir que la energía eólica costa afuera pueda aprovecharse y que se puedan desarrollar los proyectos relevantes. Hemos trabajado en temas como creación de capacidades y transferencia de conocimiento, es decir, compartiendo qué se ha hecho en otras regiones, no solamente en el Reino Unido, como lo van a ver más adelante. También trabajamos apoyándolos a evaluar cuáles son las necesidades de tecnología o de innovación para que puedan aprovechar las oportunidades de este tipo de energía a la mayoría. Hemos trabajado con diferentes países en el desarrollo de hojas de ruta y ayudándolos al desarrollo de las políticas, ajustando los marcos regulatorios donde es necesario. Recientemente terminamos una hoja de ruta justamente sobre energía eólica costa afuera en Sudáfrica. Y también podemos ayudar a hacer alguna revisión de la estructura de subsidios o de políticas relacionadas con la energía, que algunas veces pueden estar en contra del despliegue de energía renovable o específicamente de la energía eólica costa afuera. Trabajamos también con la industria y ayudamos a poder cuantificar, escalar y maximizar las estrategias tanto regionales como nacionales y también a que los países o los gobiernos con los que trabajamos puedan aprovechar las oportunidades de exportación que pueden encontrar con mercados que están cercanos para que se pueda, digamos que, concretar o hilar todo el mercado global de energía eólica marina. Para esto hacemos evaluaciones de la cadena de suministro. También podemos hacer revisiones de infraestructura y logística que ya existe en las regiones en las que están interesadas en desarrollar la energía eólica marina. Y también tenemos experiencia desarrollando centros industriales de energía eólica marina. El tercer tema o el tercer componente en el que trabajamos tiene que ver con innovación. Y algo que caracteriza mucho a Carbon Trust es que hemos facilitado la reducción de los costos, la reducción de riesgos y acelerado procesos de comercialización de nuevas tecnologías y estándares eólicos marinos. Tenemos diferentes proyectos en conjunto con la industria, que es uno de los proyectos donde justamente Christina trabaja. Trabajamos también en programas de investigación y de desarrollo y de demostración de tecnologías y además damos asesoramiento tecnológico. Y finalmente, el último componente en el que trabajamos tiene que ver con la integración de sistemas, entendiendo que la energía eólica marina tiene al final de cuentas que integrarse en el sistema energético de una región o de un país y es necesario tomar en cuenta esta visión sistémica para poder maximizar el potencial eólico marino y además demostrar que es una fuente de energía confiable y asequible. En la siguiente diapositiva, ustedes pueden ver una visión de los diferentes proyectos que hemos realizado. Como les contaba, si bien la principal experiencia de Carbon Trust ha sido en Reino Unido, como pueden ver, también hemos trabajado en diferentes geografías. Algunas de las que son más cercanas a nosotros, por ejemplo, trabajamos en el Caribe, justamente el año pasado, donde hicimos una revisión del marco regulatorio de estos países y se desarrollaron recomendaciones de cuáles eran los cambios que se deberían hacer para poder catalizar el desarrollo de proyectos de energía eólica marina. Trabajamos con gobiernos locales, perdón, también en Reino Unido, específicamente con los estados de Guernsey, también ayudándoles a hacer un análisis de las brechas o los vacíos regulatorios para poder desplegar la energía eólica marina y principalmente en el desarrollo de temas que tienen que ver con el consentimiento de las comunidades locales. Como les comentaba, también hemos trabajado en Sudáfrica desarrollando una hoja de ruta que justamente establece las acciones que debe de tomar el gobierno de Sudáfrica para poder aprovechar y desarrollar un mercado de energía eólica marina. Y aquí vimos temas desde temas regulatorios, pero también temas tecnológicos, de potencial, etcétera. Trabajamos también en India, en Escocia y también trabajamos con el gobierno británico en China. Ahora voy a pausar acá para poder pasarle la palabra a mi compañera Cristina, que les va a contar con más detalle sobre el trabajo que hemos hecho y cuál es el papel de las cadenas de valor y de las habilidades en el desarrollo del el ciclo de vida de un proyecto de energía eólica marina. Adelante, Cristina.
Thank you, Amanda, and yeah, hello everyone. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak today. And yeah, apologies that I won't be delivering the presentation in Spanish, but I hope that you can, yeah, if you have any questions, please just let me know. Yeah, so I think for offshore wind, it's important to consider the supply chain and the skills in the development of offshore wind farms. In the previous presentation, we already heard about like really prioritizing the development of local suppliers and capacity. So I thought for today's presentation it would be interesting to hear a bit more about skills development and how the UK has approached the build out of their supply chain and skills to date. So to set the scene, maybe at first an overview of the project development process. So we are usually looking at 5 phases of development in offshore wind. So at the start, we have the planning and development phase. This is the phase where we conduct site surveys. The wind farm is designed, the consents are being obtained, and also like the financing is agreed on, contracts are put in place to kind of set the scene for the specific wind farm. Then we take this design into the procurement and manufacturing phase. The site-specific components are being fabricated and assembled to then be transported to site in the 3rd phase, where the installation is taking place. Specific vessels, large vessels are bringing the components to site, installing them. And then in the 4th phase, in terms of operation and maintenance, this is kind of the longest phase over the life cycle of the wind farm. There's the monitoring, ongoing control and servicing in case there are any issues with the wind farm. Specific technicians will be will visit the wind farm and do repairs if necessary. And then the last phase, we have the decommissioning. At the end of the life cycle, the wind farm is being shut down. Assets are being removed. In the future, there might be potential for repowering as well, but that kind of brings like the whole cycle to an end. And it is quite interesting to look at the distribution of costs when we look at these 5 phases. So in the graph below, you can see how the cost really starts kicking off when the construction begins. So we have quite a lot of capex in the first 8 years of the offshore wind farm. Usually we look at 25 to 30 years of a lifespan, just to put it in context. And the cumulative production usually starts around year 8 when the turbines are being fully connected and the developer can start selling electricity to the grid. So you can really see that you start generating revenue around year 8, and the OPEX, operational costs of the wind farm, remain relatively like on the same level. So this is kind of important when we look at skills as well. If we can go to the next slide, please. There are many different skills that are required across the entire life cycle of the wind farm. When we look at the start, the survey and design phase, there is a lot of engineering work, a lot of surveying that needs to be conducted prior to any actual development. We have to do like wind measuring, the meteorological, oceanographic surveys, seabed surveys. There's impact assessment for the birds, fish, marine mammals. There's a lot of regulation around these environments that needs to be adhered to. It's also important to build regional consensus, especially if we look at indigenous communities as well, communities that are affected by the development of the wind farm. We really need to secure permits and approvals to then take the project into the next phase, the manufacturing phase, where you would need more physical skills, let's say, when we look at the actual manufacturing of the turbines, technicians, welders, the foundation manufacturing, the cable manufacturing. These are all components that are produced in like large factories. Quite a lot of more like physical jobs, I would say. Also in the assembly and installation phase, technicians have to go offshore. The offshore construction needs to be managed, like the actual installation, but also the planning of the campaign. Then the cable laying, where you need specific experts. The substation installation, we're talking about very large projects, so there are a lot of skills that we need in order to really like successfully install the project offshore. And then when we come to operation and maintenance, we require less jobs. The wind farm is operational. As I previously mentioned, there are some requirements for maintenance, regular maintenance, where technicians come out to inspect and potentially replace any parts that are malfunctioning. Also for the substations, we obviously need monitoring the cables, but less and less. And when we then come to decommissioning, we again need technicians offshore, operational experts to remove the turbines and like securely take the components back to shore, also to not harm the environment, remove the submarine cables and all that. So again, some skills required, but maybe not as much as in the first 3 phases. And then there are obviously cross-cutting jobs, skills in project planning, project managers that are monitoring the financing of the project, that are just doing due diligence throughout the whole life cycle. It's important to have that supervision in place as well. So as you can see, there are lots of opportunities. We require a lot of resource to develop a wind farm, and we require these skills for like every new project. So every new project provides an opportunity to create jobs, to facilitate the build out of resource. So on the right hand side here, you can really see that the biggest job creation opportunity is in the construction phase. It is quite a diverse skill set that we need across the life cycle, but really the manufacturing and procurement makes like up the most percentage of jobs. But there are, as I mentioned, long-term roles in operation maintenance that are required to ensure the project is running over the course of its lifetime. It really provides a good opportunity to revitalize local communities. Also, if there are any communities, for example, in like the oil and gas sector, around the transition towards new jobs in the renewable sector. So if approached appropriately, it can really provide a great opportunity for the build out of a sustainable supply chain, to address elements around just transition as well, and really provide socio-economic benefit for the region as well. So if we can go to the next slide, there is a big role of incentive mechanisms that are provided from governments on like a national level, on like a regional level, to really ensure that there is incentive put into place, support put into place to build out these industrial capabilities and have good infrastructure, reliable supplier base, and a skilled workforce. So if they are designed effectively, they can really make a difference, not just in emerging markets, also matured markets like the UK. There is always room to readjust, evaluate what works, what didn't work, and build market confidence, long-term visions for developers and industry stakeholders to approach the market and feel confident in investing into the market. So a lot around setting these long-term goals, managing the expectations for the markets that then eventually leads to cost reduction and also the reduction of uncertainty. And if you international at the start, obviously we require international skills as well. So we need this global expertise to start the market, to get things off the ground. So international supply chain partners, international developers that can be attracted by a strong policy framework. Also opportunities for innovation, responsible growth, R&D. It's always depending on the market, there are different needs. You might have different site conditions that require innovative approaches. So fostering that research that can be really helpful to develop site-specific solutions for turbines, foundations, other elements of the wind farm, to really build out a supply chain, to build out a context that works for the specific market. And then, obviously, importantly, really, once you have that, once you have the international expertise, really make sure that you translate that to your local industry as well, to create jobs for locals and develop skilled labor, and eventually also reduce the reliance on imports, which, given some geopolitical developments these days, it's like, it's a big factor as well that you really kind of strengthen your domestic market as well. So this kind of sets the scene for now. I would then now move on to maybe give some more concrete examples from the UK, what we have achieved to date and how we got there, and kind of put that a little bit more into context, what I've discussed until now. So in terms of what has been achieved in the UK, there was we achieved a lot of cost reduction between 2012 and 2019. There was a 67% reduction in levelized cost of energy in offshore wind. So we can really see that offshore wind is now cost competitive and sometimes even cheaper than fossil fuels. For example, in 2023, the strike price of offshore wind was at 44 pounds per megawatt hour, compared to combined gas, which was at 114 pounds per megawatt hour. So really a trend, for like more to build out more offshore wind if we're looking at these prices, because it's obviously reflected in the bill of like the final, like the end consumer. We also drove forward quite a lot of innovation. There was a lot of UK-based R&D programs that have investigated foundations, installation methods, cable, electrical systems, wind and wave modeling, that really set the scene for the UK context and allowed for like innovative technologies to come forward. In terms of the supply chain and the jobs, the industry now employs more than 32,000 people. So it's quite a significant number, and we expect that to grow in the future. I will touch on that in a minute. But we're really in a position where the supply chain has the potential to generate like more than 90 billion pounds by 2040, and we can use our jobs and expertise globally as well. And then the point that I raised already around energy security, obviously our domestically produced electricity reduces the reliance on imported fuels in Europe with the geopolitical tensions with Russia and Russia and the Ukraine. It was quite important for us to become more self-reliant, and the National Energy System Operator has recorded the highest penetration of wind at 70% of the overall electricity mix in 2024. So we can really see that we are progressing further and further in integrating offshore wind as like a main part of our electricity mix. And just to bring that back to like the jobs and supply chain bit, in terms of workforce, we have installed almost 16 gigawatts to date of offshore wind, contributing quite significantly to the industry. The targets are quite ambitious moving forward. So 60 gigawatts by 2030 requires quite a lot of resource that we need to mobilize. So we expect that by 2030, we would need more than 100,000 jobs in the offshore wind sector. These jobs will be mainly concentrated around areas with significant development. So like usually port sites, cluster sites like the Humber region currently employ 16% of the workforce, and like the Scottish side, Deep Wind, the cluster in Scotland has the largest share with 30% of the workforce. So we really need to make sure that we develop the right skills in order to deliver the targets that we've set. And it looks like there will be a workforce shortage. So we really have to make sure that we put the right mechanisms in place now to deliver the gigawatts that we set as target for 2030 and beyond. I talked about the role of incentive mechanisms earlier. Would now like to split it a bit between incentives aimed at like offshore wind developers specifically that you can make available, and then talk a bit more about incentives for the wider supply chain. But previously the UK has been quite reliant on imported components from the rest of Europe. So on the right-hand side, you can see where we find turbine factories, foundation factories, like grid equipment factories are quite scattered across the North Sea. And we see that with the increasing pipeline, there's really an opportunity to build these skills domestically, build out the supply chain domestically, so we don't depend on the European counterparts as much anymore. And the government, both on a national level, the UK government, but also a sub-national level, like the devoluted government for like Scotland, Wales, they are encouraging offshore wind developers to invest locally. So for example, the UK government has introduced the Clean Industry Bonus, which will provide financial rewards for offshore wind developers that prioritize investment in the region, particularly targeting former oil and gas communities, because we really see that these areas could like suffer from deprivation if there's not any investment being made over the next decade. So this bonus will be paid out to those developers who clearly in their procurement like show that they are planning to make investments. In Scotland specifically, the Crown Estate, they've included supply chain development statements in the leasing round in ScotWind. So the developers here have to submit a statement where you can see if the developers made investment in local supply chains. So it's currently at 60%. What the Crown Estate wants to see of like domestic investment. So again, like clearly incentivizing that local element in the evaluation of the bid. And then lastly, an example that I will dive into a bit more in a second is the Energy Skills Passport, which has recently been introduced, and it really targets the former oil and gas industry jobs, people who've been employed and who are seeking to transfer their skills and be reintroduced into the renewable sector. But we often find that quite a lot of the oil and gas skills are translatable to offshore wind, particularly on the floating side. So this passport really seeks to enable the transition of skills, especially if we're looking at this this huge need for a larger workforce, that we also work with the oil and gas workers that we already have, because often there's significant knowledge, so we are trying to tap into this. In terms of the wider supply chain, the government supports through national investment schemes. They support industrial clusters to foster regional collaborations between the industry, also academia, like skill centers where the like apprenticeships and universities to like build the new generation of an offshore wind workforce. But also significant investments in ports. Often like the industry will be located around ports, so to make sure that we attract their stakeholders to settle within like the cluster region, and then skills development programs that are looking at transferring skills. I'm going to talk about that in a second again. So in terms of investment schemes, I thought it'd be worth highlighting a couple of them. There's obviously a lot going on, but particularly the offshore wind manufacturing support scheme was successful. So the government provided funding to companies that are building their bases in the UK. So for example, Seawind, they've built a monopile manufacturing facility in the Humber region, which created 750 jobs, was aiming to create that by 2030. They received significantly 117 million pounds for that. The same goes for Smulder, a Belgian fabricator that received 70 million pounds to manufacture transition pieces in the UK and then serve the offshore wind farms. So that is quite direct investment, direct incentive for these companies to settle in the UK. And because that was quite successful and we could really, see the impact it had on like the build out, the government has also launched an initiative that focuses on floating offshore wind manufacturing. There are obviously different requirements, larger facilities for manufacturing, but also requirements around port upgrading, ports that can actually accommodate these structures, large structures. So 160 million pounds were earmarked for that. And the port of Cromarty Firth in Scotland, you can see on the right, and also Port Talbot in Wales have been selected for this primary phase for significant upgrading through this fund. And then there's also the Supply Chain Accelerator Fund that provides businesses with 50% match funding for early stage business development. So also quite a good incentive or maybe a smaller business development to get involved in offshore wind and like the build out of the supply chain. We can move on to the next slide. Yeah, just focusing again on the Humber offshore wind cluster, we really like using this example because it really shows how the government, incentives were successfully placed in areas that were quite deprived. So Hull and Grimsby around the Humber cluster, they have been fighting industrial decline because the fishing industry and also the shipping industry has kind of left the area. So the government invested in a green port, so a deep water port that can really serve the wind farms for operation and maintenance, but also some installation. They invested in the surrounding land, 500 hectares, to really build out, for companies to build out their sites with direct quayside access. There's an airport. There's support in projects and programs committed to delivering sustainable jobs and economic growth. It's well connected by road and rail as well, and they have a focused university that I previously mentioned earlier that really focuses on delivering programs for the new generation of the UK offshore wind workforce. And that really attracted investment. Like a lot of the wind farms are located along the coast. So companies like Siemens Gamesa, they seen significant value in investing there. So they have they invested in the blade manufacturing facility. This was a joint investment over 500 million pounds by ABP and Siemens. And 1,300 new jobs were created, and there are also further indirect jobs, more than 1,000, in the supply chain in that cluster area. And also Ørsted, a major developer, was attracted to the region, and they developed an East Coast hub with a major operation and maintenance center. So there's quite significant job creation as well, 600 direct jobs, and also further more than 1,000 jobs to be expected in the construction of upcoming wind farms. So really attractive environment that was created. And again, as I already mentioned, the University of Hull and the Aura Innovation Center that are specializing in renewable energy. So you can really see that a lot of different actors have come together to drive offshore wind development from that specific site, and it really generates value within the communities along the coast. So it's quite it has been quite successful to date. And then the next slide, the energy skills passport, just some more information, because it's been the uptake was very well. Then a lot of countries are facing that challenge of transitioning from an oil and gas industry with an oil and gas workforce to the renewable sector. So in the UK, we expect a significant decline from around 120,000 jobs in 2023 to only 87,000 by 2030. So we would like to, retrain and reintegrate these individuals in the workforce, as 90% of the workers have transferable skills. So the Scottish government initially funded it with 3.7 million pounds to Opito. They were the company that kickstart the program between 2022 and 2024. And then because it was received so well on a national level, the UK government also confirmed additional support for that delivery pot, so it can be rolled out across the entire UK. And really, I've already mentioned this. Supporting the workers in the transition, making sure that just transition takes place as well, streamline skills, and address also a lack of cross-sector recognition of qualification, which sometimes makes it difficult for people to re-enter the workforce. So it has been taken up quite well. Also, other markets like Brazil, the US, they showed interest in applying a similar initiative to their respective markets. Quite interesting. And then on the next slide, it just to bring it all together, it's really important to acknowledge the role of regional and local governments, also on a national level, UK government, but really port authorities, also the universities and research. We can set a lot at a national level by the UK government or by government in other markets, but then the implementation really requires the buy-in, investment, expertise and delivery support by the partners on the ground in the regions, and also people who obviously know the region really well and need to be involved and need to find out what would work best for their environment. Are there environmental consideration that we need to take? Are there indigenous communities? What does the workforce look like? Often the national government doesn't have full oversight of that. So it's really important that we bring everyone together. I highlighted it with the example of the Hamburg cluster, but I'm sure that in Mexico, in the region that we are addressing today in this meeting, there would be several actors that would be, it would be great to involve them in order to build out a solution that really works best for the specific context. So it's important to keep that in mind. And then on the next slide, it's kind of a key takeaways, the last slide. It really yeah, as I said, it's important to have a clear understanding where you want to go as a region, give certainty to developers, assess what the supply chain, what is needed for the supply chain, which investment is required, what is the situation with local workforce, with local industries that can be involved. And then really set out policy and regulation to create a positive investment environment. And yeah, national investment schemes, clusters, skills development programs have all been successfully deployed in the UK, but it's definitely something that can be applied across markets, emerging markets, matured markets. It's nothing that only works for the UK. So you can really use these lessons and learn from them and think about these elements early on. We've learned about this in like 20 years, but like we feel like in new markets it could like develop even quicker if we think about it from like an early stage onwards. And yeah, like work together, as I said, on a national level, but also regional level to really make sure we develop solutions that are fit for the context that they are being applied in. So that's all from my presentation today. Thank you very much. And yeah, let me know if there are any questions that you would like me or Amanda to address. I see one question in English in the chat. What is, in your experience, the minimum size in terms of gigawatt of a project's pipeline in order to attract local investment of OEMs, tier 1 and tier 2 firms? So usually what we say is a gigawatt to make it like financially viable and attractive. Otherwise, yeah, if it's less, we would be looking at importing components rather than in the OEMs and tier 1 and tier 2 firms to build out like a specific site. It would be financially more viable to just import the components.
Thank you, Christina. Sorry about that. Thank you for your presentation. I think we have other couple of questions, but they are Spanish, so sorry about that. I think esta pregunta está dirigida a Octavio. Mencionan hasta qué punto las mediciones meteorológicas por costa afuera en el Golfo de México están ya hechas por Pemex, plataformas de oil and gas, entre paréntesis. No sé, Octavio, si quieras comentar algo.
Sí, con mucho gusto. Gracias por la pregunta, René. No toqué prácticamente el tema de la presencia de la industria petrolera costa afuera, justamente en esta zona, digamos, del litoral de la península de Yucatán, particularmente de la zona de Campeche. Pero es un elemento adicional de atractividad para esta zona. Si recordamos el caso de Escocia, tiene también similitudes en ese sentido con esta zona por la presencia de una industria petrolera muy importante, costa afuera, que está teniendo ya sinergias interesantes. Ya acaba de decir Christina, ¿no? Cómo la industria petrolera costa afuera, en el caso de Escocia y también en el caso nuestro, pues va en declinación, y en ambos países ha sido, digamos, una industria de muchas décadas que ha formado muchos cuadros técnicos, que ha consolidado muchas empresas en la cadena de proveeduría y que puede ser sin duda aprovechable, que una parte significativa de estas empresas y de este personal pudiera en el futuro transferir sus capacidades y adecuar sus capacidades también para una industria costa afuera de energía eólica que no va a estar en declive nunca, ¿no? Digamos, hasta donde podemos entender, el recurso eólico es renovable, ¿no? A diferencia del petróleo y el gas. Y sin duda la presencia de Pemex de varias décadas en la zona de Campeche significa que deben tener un acervo de información muy importante. que, digamos, para fines marítimos, de navegación, para la propia operación de las plataformas y sus regímenes de seguridad, deben tener una base estadística meteorológica muy robusta que se puede utilizar, que puede servir para afinar los datos a nivel satelital y de gran visión. Probablemente no cubra la totalidad del litoral, pero sí una porción interesante. Todos estos datos para el nivel de planeación van a ser sin duda muy útiles, ¿no? Yo simplemente diría, esto no excluiría que luego el desarrollador que ganara una licitación para un área específica tuviera necesariamente que hacer sus propias mediciones in situ, ¿no? Eso para precisar, digamos, el potencial de esa área específica. Pero para los fines iniciales de planeación, de que el gobierno pueda preparar lo necesario para para hacer rondas, creo que sin duda la información de Planix puede ser de gran utilidad.
Gracias, Octavio. Tenemos otra pregunta en el chat y esta a lo mejor también la podría contestar el equipo de Carbon Trust, Amanda y Cristina. So, la voy a hacer en inglés. Christina, Amanda, there's a question in the chat talking about challenges that the local governments, in the case of Mexico, in the peninsula, could have on the execution of projects on offshore, like what do you think from your experience of what you've seen that could be some of the main challenges governments face towards trying to introduce this new technology into their cities? And Octavio, if you can also add to that on the experience of Mexico.
Amanda, maybe you have more insights on the specific context in Mexico. I'm not entirely aware what like the dynamics with the regional governments and like the national governments are like, but I think it is important, like it is challenging if it's just a regional government that supports offshore wind but doesn't have like the backup on like a national level. So I think it would be important that you are aligned, that like the government, for example, like publishes targets for like the entirety of Mexico, and then you would have sub-targets for the specific region, because that really like that signals commitment for developers that everyone is aligned and there's like a clear way forward. If like also if you have incentive mechanisms coming from a national level, it would just be about that alignment and then like the clear business case, I think, which could be missing if it was just one regional government supporting like the build out in like a specific area. And also from like a legal perspective, the certain authorities sit with like the national government. So in terms of leasing out sites, that would also be a question that obviously needs to be signed off on like a national level. But Amanda or Octavio, if you have any more thoughts.
Sí, thanks, Cristina. Creo que voy a complementar en español, pero creo que justo lo que menciona Cristina de tener la alineación entre lo que se está buscando a nivel local con las metas o los planes que se tienen a nivel nacional. Se tiene que garantizar que haya una alineación para que no haya de pronto como contraposición entre lo que está buscando lo que están buscando los gobiernos locales o estatales contra lo que se está buscando a nivel nacional. Y también algo que mencionaba Cristina ahora, que tiene que ver con la parte legal o las atribuciones, ¿no? ¿Quién tiene la atribución de poder dar las concesiones de cómo se utiliza el lecho marino, etcétera? Y algo que a mí me pareció también relevante mientras Octavio estaba enseñando los mapas de las regiones que podrían ser justamente en la zona del sureste del país, tiene que ver también con los impactos en temas de biodiversidad o de recursos naturales, que al menos en la parte de Yucatán sé que es una zona con muchísimo manglar, entonces hay que tener como que todos los estudios, las capacidades para hacer los estudios de impacto ambiental y también el llevarlos a cabo. Y obviamente el tener la sensibilización y el consentimiento de las poblaciones locales, ¿no? Creo que eso también puede ser un reto que enfrentan los gobiernos locales y como países de la región de Latinoamérica también, como por toda la parte tanto cultural como de biodiversidad que tenemos que cuidar también. Sí, creo que lo dejaría un poco ahí. Adelante, Octavio.
Yo simplemente diría, eh, el punto de partida tendría que ser una visión común del proyecto por parte de las autoridades federales y de las autoridades locales, de que se trata de un proyecto integral de desarrollo regional y no solo de un proyecto de producción de energía renovable. Las atribuciones de la energía en el país las tiene la federación, las tiene el gobierno federal, pero sin duda el interés de desarrollar energía renovable en el mar tiene que ver sobre todo con la posibilidad de desarrollar una cadena de suministro robusta en tierra, en la zona local, regional. Es un proyecto con dos áreas muy claramente identificadas y en donde, digamos, las autoridades federales y eh, estatales, municipales, debieran estar sentados a la mesa desde el principio, definiendo cuál es el proyecto y cómo se va a realizar. Creo que es el punto de partida fundamental. Hay un tema, desde luego, pues de necesidad de recursos. Por eso yo mencionaba en la presentación que una fuente que puede ser muy importante para habilitar a las regiones y a los estados para recibir eh, eh, a empresas dentro de la cadena de suministro es la posibilidad de utilizar los propios ingresos, ¿no?, de las rondas, de los pagos iniciales, para desarrollar la infraestructura que se requiere, porque se van a requerir fortalecer puertos, ¿no? Y zonas industriales en tierra ligadas a los puertos, donde puede establecerse justamente la proveeduría, pero también las bases de operación de los desarrolladores para llevar, digamos, eh, los equipos y hacer, digamos, todo el manejo de tierra a la zona marina. Y aquí hay, digamos, un tema de que la región misma, los estados, no particularmente Yucatán y Campeche en este caso, pues también tendría que ponerse de acuerdo desde el principio, ¿no?, que fuera un frente común regional alineado, ¿no?, con el gobierno federal y todos sentados a la mesa.
Gracias, Octavio. Les agradezco mucho y voy a también hacer como Spanglish para que Cristina también nos pueda entender. Hi, Christina, thank you a lot again for your time. It was a very interesting presentation. I think you gave us a lot to think about on what the next steps should be and what we should focus on. So I think a lot of us will go back and think on what we'll have to do to try to push forward offshore wind in Mexico. Gracias, Octavio. Gracias, Amanda, por su tiempo. Gracias a Guillermo y al equipo de Fidesur por la cooperación y por el apoyo de estas 4 sesiones. Esta sería la última sesión en la que colaboramos por ahora. Y pues les agradezco nuevamente si han participado en más de una de las sesiones. Espero que hayan encontrado interesante el contenido y pues seguimos aquí para cualquier cosa que necesitan.
Muchas gracias a nuestras expositoras invitadas, Octavio, por esta sesión de cierre de estas 4 sesiones del webinar. La verdad es que ha sido muy enriquecedor el timeline que nos comparte Cristina sobre el desarrollo de estos proyectos. Nos deja bien claro la tarea que se puede asumir hoy desde el gobierno nacional y los gobiernos locales para justo hacer una hoja de ruta y tomar las previsiones que implica establecer los objetivos de desarrollo de estos campos de aprovechamiento eólico y todo lo que implica el desarrollo de nuevas industrias verdes que por ahora no están presentes en la región. La experiencia colombiana que nos compartieron en la segunda sesión de este webinar también da referencia del periodo de tiempo relativamente corto en el que el gobierno colombiano está implementando una política de desarrollo de energía eólica costa afuera, que es en condiciones muy, muy similares al contexto mexicano. Entonces, muchas gracias a todos ustedes, a la Embajada Británica, al equipo que respaldó esta iniciativa y nos dio un gran apoyo acercando expositores con estas experiencias que sin duda son muy relevantes para esta etapa de lanzamiento de esta iniciativa hacia la transición energética y el desarrollo de energías renovables en México. Muchas gracias.